Sign in. Zoom. Good. Okay, I don't want to clip anything. Mute. Audio. What about me?
Hank, if you were testing to see if people can hear you, I can hear you.
Okay, I couldn't hear anything, but now I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any sound yet.
Oh, well, you made a sound.
Right, I don't think there's any sound coming from the meeting room.
Okay, and who are you? You are?
I'm on the Ward 6 steering committee. My name's Dale.
Dale. Okay, I'm on Ward 4, as is my partner to my left is Carmen. I can't hear her. She's muted. And now she's not.
Can you hear us from the room, Hank?
Oh, there we go. I was saying, I feel like we're on the Brady Bunch, you know, like when they have the cubes. Hey, Hank. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Carmen.
How's it going?
And Sarah in my lower left is also with Ward 7?
Yeah.
Or 4? 7. I didn't know that this meeting is in person if you wanted to. Holy moly. Or is that just the officials?
No,
Certainly not.
you could come on down if you wanted.
I'll never get there on time. That's okay. I didn't even get here on time.
Oh, sorry, you didn't know.
I'm going to mute myself now.
One upstairs.
I didn't think anybody would show up in person. I just didn't want to be the only one down there.
You got snacks.
It's live stream, so you can read one. Cruise through at 1.5 speed.
Thank you. I was gonna be so proud of you.
Thank you. Yeah, go to a dinner and then catching up. Yeah, I did it last night. Right when they were
You
thick
get
in the debate.
oh, you've got 2 copies. Okay.
Oh, I just. Highlights it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The packet too. Here is this. I can pass.
Seems like a really functional body.
Yeah. Love it. Really good. Big sky.
Yeah.
But. Realize is about one.
No, great, great. It's really more on.
Here's the packets. Whatever you prefer. Maybe here, I can give you the agenda. It's 2 pages each and I'll do the packet. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
In a rain. Yeah, yeah.
They were sad. But we did go to Green Mountain Conference. Which was really good. So it all was good, but.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for everybody who's also online. Any question for somebody who's in the a steering committee member who would like to, essence, facilitate this meeting, to go through the agenda? Is there anybody who would like to take on that role? Is there anybody, steering committee member here who would like to take on the role of being the moderator, for tonight's meeting? I know here at CETO as staff, we're here to assist you in the meetings. We're happy to moderate this meeting, but going forward, we'd have somebody in the MPA moderating these types of meetings. Hearing none, will you do it,
I'll
Chris?
do it for the time. I have to get early in about a half hour, but I can facilitate.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I'd like to call the meeting of the All Wards NPA to order. Get a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved. There a second? Thank you. Agenda has been adopted. We're going to move into welcome and introductions. I'll start. My name is Chris Hazley. I'm on the steering committee for Ward 3. I live on College Street, and I've been on the NPA now for about 3 years. All right.
Finish chewing. Hi, everybody. I'm Jess Hyman. I'm on the Ward 2 NPA Steering Committee, and I've been on the steering committee for about 4 years, I think.
Ryan Nick, Ward 8 steering committee member, been on the steering committee for about 6 weeks. Pronouns are he, him, and I live on King Street.
I'm Lena, they, them, and I'm on the Ward 5 steering committee. I have been on that committee for about a year.
I'm Molly Flanagan. I'm on the Ward 2 steering committee. She, her, and I've been on for about 3.5 years.
Chapel Sokol, he, him. I'm on the Ward 1 steering committee, and I think I probably got on about a year before you did, the Ward 1. So,
I'm Carol Livingston, she, her, and I have been on the Ward 1 steering committee probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. You think it's been that long? Anyway.
Samantha Ayotte, Ward 1 steering committee, about almost a year. I don't remember when I had jumped on. And pronouns are she, her. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Scott Rogers, he, him. I'm a community development manager with CETO, and I'm here as administrative support to the MPAs.
Hi, Fosca, she, her pronouns. I also work for CETO as the NPA Public Engagement Specialist.
Okay, we'll do introductions for our folks who are joining us online via Zoom.
Hi.
I'll dive in. I'm Dale Azaria. I'm on the Ward 6 steering committee and have been for about 2.5 years, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Nancy Harkins. I wasn't able to change my name on my screen, my Zoom screen. I'm also on the Ward 6 steering committee for about 2.5 years. I live on Hoover Street.
My name is Hank Prensky. I'm on the brand new reconstituted NPA of Wards 4 and 7. So I've been on for about 6 minutes. And he, him on Apple Tree Point Lane, not Apple Tree Point Road.
Hi, everyone. I am Lauren Ebersol. I'm on the Ward 2 steering committee. I use she, her pronouns, and I have been on this steering committee for about 6 months, and I previously served on the Ward 8 steering committee before that.
Hi, I'm Carmen George. I am on the Ward 4-7 steering committee with Hank and Sarah. And yeah, we haven't even had our first meeting yet. So fresh into the scene. Yeah, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hey.
I'm Sarah Diaz, steering committee. I'm myself in Ward 7. I live on North Ave. And also real fresh. I use she and they pronouns.
Is there anybody else online who would like to introduce themselves? We got everybody?
I'm Christopher Aaron Felker. I live in Ward 3, chairman of the Burlington Republican Party. And thanks for having me.
I can pop on real quick. I'm Rebecca Lawrence Gomez. I also work with CETO, and I'll be presenting and speaking with you all in probably about 10, 20, 30 minutes, depending on how the agenda goes. I use she, her pronouns, and I'll just be talking about a plan that the city is working on for which we're looking for feedback.
Hi, this is Todd DeLuca. I'm from Ward 4, and I'm just here to listen.
I'm Michelle Borbas. I'm on Ward 3, and I've been on 4 months.
All right, thank you everybody for taking the time to introduce yourselves. Quick announcement here that the de-escalation training for interested steering committee members will be held on January the 30th from 5 to 7 p.m. Right here in the Sharon Busher conference room, if anyone is interested in that. Okay, next up on the agenda, the NPA input on the con plan. Rebecca Lawrence Gomez here will be presenting on that. She's our housing manager from CETO. So without further ado, it's all you, Rebecca. Rebecca, are you available? Are we having technical difficulties?
Hi, Rebecca. We're ready for your presentation.
Since Rebecca seems to be temporarily unavailable, maybe we should move on to the next item on the agenda, perhaps. And that will be an overview of the bylaw work expectations and updates. I assume Scott and or Fosca, you'll be presenting on those items. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Mainly, we just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page about this. The city council passed a resolution on October 23rd, I believe, asking that the NPAs do some work to make the NPAs more open and accessible. And they have asked that the NPAs do so by January 31st, 2024, or as soon as possible. So this is just a reminder about that. And basically, I think last All Wards meeting, it was unclear, whether the city would be coming forward with bylaws for you to use or vice versa. And so we just had an update that I believe you were all emailed about this as well, but just to reiterate that you all are welcome to make changes to your bylaws. Scott put together some sample bylaws that we're working with the city attorney's office to make better, and you're welcome to create changes to those bylaws, vote them in, and then we suggest that then the city attorney's office take a look at them to ensure that they adhere with city policies on anti-discrimination and inclusion. I don't know, Scott, if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Fosca. So we had a meeting earlier with the city attorney's office, and they did give us some I think really excellent feedback. Obviously, as MPAs, you're in control of your own process on how you want to update your bylaws. Certainly, there are things I think that through the city resolution that they would like to be included. But we did want to open it up today to, I think, get an idea of where the various boards are in the process of updating their bylaws, if there's additional guidance that we can provide. And we will provide additional guidance with some of the feedback that we've received from the city's attorney's office. We're certainly very thankful for the city's attorney's office for the work they're doing on that. I can let you know that REIB is working very hard on the process. Should complaints or the need to potentially remove a steering committee member, that process is being developed. I expect that we'll have some more answers on that shortly, but certainly do appreciate the hard work that REIB is doing on that. That is something I think that'll be very important as you move in your process of updating your bylaws as well. We will
Scott,
have
can
more.
you say what REIB means?
Oh, sorry. That is Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. This is a Department of City Government that is here to advise us on the best ways to reach out to a diverse community and different populations. And they'll be taking a role in this process. We will have, I think, more specific information on, in essence, a complaint process to you within possibly by as soon as Friday, as we go through some of the materials that we've received from the city's attorney's office. We're happy to answer any questions and hear your feedback of where you are in the process and timing, etc. Is there a hand raised?
Can you send out a copy of the city council resolution so that we can read it and make sure that we are respecting what they voted on?
It's connected to the last All Wards NPA meeting posting on Civic Clerk. If you have Civic Clerk handy, it's one of the attachments to that meeting, if that's available for you.
Okay, I sent you an email earlier. I'm having trouble getting in there, so.
Okay, we'll resend it to everybody. I think it'll probably be helpful to get a fresh email. So we'll do that for you, Carmen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, Scott and Fosca. So the Wards 2 NPA passed, approved its revised bylaws this last week. Once the REIB has developed the complaint process, will that need to be inserted into the bylaws and will we need to vote on them again? Or would that information be separate from the bylaws?
You would need to put that process into your bylaw. So I do appreciate how fast you were to get those updated, but there'd probably be another vote to add some additional information in there. Again, we know we looked at wards 2 and 3 and you already have some very strong bylaws. So that was, good to see. But yeah, once we have more clarification on that process, with a little bit more clarification on a potential removal process. Again, I hope this is a process that the MPAs will never use. It'll be there. There's options, including removal, censure. Each of these processes comes with, reciprocal rights for all the individuals involved, and we want to make sure we respect those. But this information should be forthcoming.
Thank you.
All right, so we've heard from Ward 7 and Ward 2. We'll get an update from perhaps Ward 1.
First of all, it'd be great if people in the room could speak up a little bit too. That'd be great. I guess I'm confused. I attended the last All Wards meeting. And there are a couple of things operating for me in this. One is that I think it's pretty important that we have consistent language among the wards. That's what I think. I'd be interested in hearing what other people have to say. And that it's consistent with what the city has for any discrimination language. My understanding from leaving the last meeting is that there were going to be folks that were going to craft some suggested language for us to take a look at. So we haven't, as Ward 1, we haven't taken this task on yet. I mean, Lena, you all had come up with, I thought, really good language. We looked at it last time. I I'm sort of wondering what the process here is for, we have, people working on their own, and then we have something coming out of CETO. And to be honest, I think we're just gonna sit tight till it all sort of sugars out. Because we have a lot going on, and that's just, it's not number one in our attendees, to be honest. It would be something that us SC nerds would be working on, but.
And if I can just say,
Yeah.
we don't really have any interest in opening up the can of worms more than once. I really appreciate that you've already done that, but it makes no sense at all. So when CETO and REIB and everybody comes back with, the what from column A and what from column B, then we can go and approach it.
If it's helpful. Go ahead, Scott.
I just want to say that's great feedback, and I think that's a good course of action. The sample, sorry, I keep forgetting it doesn't project. So the sample that we put together, that's for you to use as you see fit. You can customize things the way you feel if you feel works better for the culture of your MPA. There will be some select things that, the city attorney's office will say, pay special attention to this because we think you need to have it, because there will be ultimately a process that we have to have the legal justification for. So it'll be important that maybe that you follow the city guidance on that very clearly. Other things are really up to you and your ward to develop as you see fit.
Could I just make a suggestion? I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit last month, that the city's anti-discrimination policy should be part of the NPAs. If that exists, wonderful. It would be great to have a link, a clear link to it that we can just drop in. And if REIB is going to do something, or the city's attorney is going to do something, why don't they just create some dummy links, and we can just put in our bylaws, we will follow policy based on the link here. And just as soon as you guys are ready, we'll be ready. So we don't have to go and think too hard about it. If there are mandatory things that need to go in, you should provide the links for them, and then we can just put the links in our bylaws.
And we can do that. We already have, and we'll certainly ensure that you have the links to this, but the non-discrimination policy of the city, the inclusion policy of the city, and certainly we'll link to everybody, ultimately what any sort of complaint process looks like, or removal process should look like. And so we can get everybody that language, and for your ward, if that's the path you want to take, I think that's a good path.
Anybody from Ward 4 want to speak?
Sorry, Dale online has had hand raised for a while, so maybe have Dale speak.
Thanks. This is Dale from Ward 6. So we had used the sample that was provided to develop some proposed Ward 6 bylaws that we were going to bring to our February 1st meeting. But it seems a little strange to do that if there's actually more language still coming that we don't have yet. So it would be helpful to understand that better. And also, Scott, I heard you say something about having the city attorney review the bylaws. And it seems to me that we would want to do that before we bring them for a vote, because it'd be kind of a waste of time to vote on things if we're going to hear later that they don't pass muster. So I guess, although we have bylaws that we were set to put out in February for discussion and then probably vote in March, that is the schedule that we were looking at, but it sounds like maybe we're going to want to push that back.
Hi, Dale. And that's a great point. And interesting thing that you do mention, the city attorney's office has mentioned to us the idea that before they're voted on, they can take a look at the draft and provide comments before it's voted on. So that's another tact you can take, and it's probably the best tact to take. So within the city, the resolution city council passed, it noted that the MPAs should make changes to their bylaws by the end of January 31st or as soon as practicable. So, if in certain cases, some wards go to the beginning of March, I think that's fine. If a ward had to call a special meeting in between that to just we're gonna devote one meeting to do our bylaws and get it done, I think that's fine as well. And Dale, and I do apologize.
Scott,
for
I'm just gonna,
questions.
I'm gonna make a comment about that. That's something that we were concerned about. I have a feeling that if we called a special meeting just to address bylaws, we would not get a quorum, which our current bylaws say is 10 people. I honestly don't think there's 10 people who would show up just to talk about bylaws. So I don't, maybe in other wards it's different, but in Ward 6, I don't see a special meeting being an option, because if we don't get a quorum, then we still can't vote.
Thank you, Dale. And yeah, I would suggest following, your ward better than we do. And if it goes into March, certainly that is as soon as practicable.
I think we'll recognize Christopher and Falker and then Hank Prensky.
Thank you. I've heard a lot of talk about sample bylaws being distributed from CEDO and the city attorney's office, but I don't see it listed in the agenda packet. Is there some place where that is located that I can review them? Please.
Hi, Christopher. I am happy to email those directly to you as soon as I can. I will, as well as I'm trying to incorporate some of the changes that have been requested by the city attorney's office. So I'll get those when they're completed as well. So I'm happy to keep that line of communication open.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that the last version, and maybe Scott, if you wouldn't mind numbering your versions, like having something so we know that I can say I'm using version whatever, that would be helpful. Either that or putting a date on it. What's your name, Christopher? If you want to see the suggested version, if you go to northburlingtonnpa.com. and you go to the agenda page, you go to the bylaws page, it has the current bylaws, and then down below it has the last version I received from Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to comment that if you're going to incorporate several things that are suggested or required by the city attorney, if you could have some way of labeling the different parts. You know how you fill out every goddamn thing online and there's a little asterisk that says this thing is required. This is a required field. So if you would give us a key to say these are the required fields that are going to be in everybody's bylaws. So don't even mess with them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hank. That's we will make sure that is done for everyone.
So I think we've heard from all wards. Ryan, do you want to give an update on 6, 8? Excuse me. Sorry,
Please. Ward 8.
Ward 8. Sorry.
My new home. We're gonna have our meeting next week to discuss these. It'll be on the agenda. Not to cause an issue or what's the virtue of us all having different anti-discrimination policies? Particularly around issues like this and conflict resolution, I feel like it should be consistent across the MPAs. I don't want to move houses and have a different, discrimination policy.
That's good because I can clarify that as well. I think the expectation would be around those type of policies, non-discrimination, part of the process of potentially removing people, sanctions, that would follow a process that's been guided to us and advised to us by the city attorney's office.
Okay.
And I'll make that when I do update the sample bylaws, I'll make that abundantly clear to people.
Yeah.
As well, just so you know, because I think Hank and I think your questions are really, really on point. And then ultimately there are things that it's really up to you to kind of look at the culture of your MPA and I think that might be one of the wonderful things about the MPAs is that they're all different. So, but there'll be certain things where we think there is some level of legal obligation or potential that puts the city potentially in a situation that may not be defensive legally.
Right.
We're going to want to make sure that all.
Okay, so we are going to have the same, whatever it is, it's going to be the same across all the MPAs eventually.
Yes,
Okay.
that'd be the
Great.
expectation.
That's wonderful.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to add from the wards?
I'm from Ward 5. Don't think there's anyone else from 5 online. You brought up that we had shared some language at the last All Wards meeting. One of the ways that we've tried to walk the line between, I also don't see the benefit of everybody having different bylaws that are this, that, and the other. I think it would be really helpful to, as someone online said, like, let's be really clear about what is the same in all of the bylaws. And then many of us already have bylaws, the rest of which do not need to be changed. That's fine. That allows us to like keep our character. I believe that culture is broader and more robust than the language of bylaws. So I'm like, I don't really get it, but that's fine.
So.
Yeah. Anyway, we had a really great discussion in Ward 5 about the resolution, which we brought the original text of to the last All Wards meeting, and then it totally changed over the course of our discussion. So we were able to have a really good conversation as a community and really get into like why it's important that we do this, which I think is much more like essential to our neighborhood fabric than the words in the resolution. And then we passed it unanimously with a vote of 20-0. Like it was a really cool experience. And I think the bylaws process will be a little more belabored because that language is inherently less accessible. But if we can get really clear guidance on like XYZ things are the same, the rest of it do with
Have
what
at it,
please,
yes.
then we make sure that folks are accommodated no matter what ward they live in.
Sounds good.
And one more thing, Scott, if you can indicate, or all of us would need to indicate in our bylaws which paragraphs or which issues are required by the city, so that if somebody is, in our wards just happens to want to look at the bylaws, it's clear that this is there because it's a required field. And that we didn't decide that. So if you have problems with that, talk to Scott and Fosca. Okay.
Jessica?
Yeah, thank you, Hank, Elena, for those comments.
And excuse me. I just wanted to agree with and add to what Hank just said. And I realize I'm saying this after we've approved our bylaws and this could mean a change, but I think structurally it might be a lot easier if there was the standard bylaws that every ward has, and that's the top part. And then there's an and also, and to have things that are specific to the different wards as a separate section, just because it would be really difficult, just as Hank was saying, it'd be difficult for someone reading it to know like which is the special thing for ward 2 and 2 and 3, and which is a special thing for ward 8. So I think just in terms of clarity, it might be helpful to have that standard text and then the and in ward, whatever the additional things. For us, it would require that would require a lot more work, which I'm not speaking on behalf of our steering committee right now. That's just my thought as I'm listening to the conversation.
Thank you, Jess. And I think we can probably work up an option for that as well.
Okay, any further comments on the bylaws discussion?
Looks like
Yes, sir. I just have a point of information, and that's for Scott. I appreciate that you said that you would send the paper, the write-ups from the city attorney and from CEDO out. I just have a point of information question, just so that way we're clear. The bylaws and the procedures that you're talking about through REIB for grievance and removal or censure, I'd just like some clarification. Removal and censure of steering committee members exclusively, or is this are you looking to extend this to NPA or community members who are in attendance? Can somebody please clarify for me, please?
Yeah, great question, Christopher, Aaron, and I can certainly clarify it to the best of my ability. So the removal process and censure is really focused on steering committee members, should it rise to that occasion. Again, people have to come to the realization that steering committee members, as well as many people, don't leave their First Amendment rights at the door. But what we've been told is that the steering committee can extend clear expectations of meeting behaviors that they have to universally apply to everybody, which some MPAs do at the beginning of every MPA. They'll say, respect people, listen to different opinions, don't talk over people. So those are the type of things that an MPA can put in place. Should someone continue to violate those, then there could be sanction. In regard to somebody in an open meeting of the public, there could potentially be an option in an extreme case for a person to be removed who wasn't following the meeting guidelines. And certainly those meeting guidelines would have to be even-handedly applied to everyone attending the public meeting. You know, whether it was, you know, a religion, somebody was going after someone's religion, or somebody was going after someone for their sexuality, personal, as long as it's applied even-handedly and consistently, my understanding is that a MPA could potentially ask a member of the public to leave a meeting. They could certainly ask a member of the public to leave the meeting if the person was speaking beyond their time limits or in other ways disrupting the course of the meeting.
Recognize Todd DeLuca, who's had his hand up. Todd, you're up.
Sorry, just trying to get the Zoom to work. Hello. Yeah, I just wanted a little clarity around like the issue with pronouns and the bylaws, because this is what we're talking about, right? Like people who use sex-based pronouns like Jeff Comstock versus people who use self-assigned pronouns, and whether or not how people use to choose pronouns is considered something that can get you kicked out of the MPA. And so I was just hoping that someone would very specifically clarify, like, if you are a person who uses sex-based pronouns, so what that means is, I'm talking about, like, you would refer to a woman as she, her, and a man as he, him. Is that behavior that will get you kicked out of an MPA? If someone could clarify that, please.
Hi, Todd. Yeah, so I do want to say that, you know, I don't have a firm answer for you today. This is something that's being worked on with our REIB and the city attorney's office. Obviously, there'll be some legal work done on this. And we'll get back to you with more information. You know, what I can say is, you know, the rules are different for people who are on MPAs, who attend MPAs, and then there's rules for staff. As a staff member, I follow city protocols on pronoun usage. So we will get you more definitive information, and I will certainly be following up with REIB, the city's attorney's office, to get that clarification as soon as possible.
Thank you.
I have a question. What is the legal liability of steering committee members? And I know this is a big question. I'm so sorry, Scott, but I want to know, you know, if I'm silent and there is somebody who continually takes actions, which I think that, you know, the interesting Todd was saying, like, say someone decides I'm only, no matter what this person tells me, I'm going to keep referring to them as what I perceive as their biological gender. Because there could be intersex people, you know, there's huge assumptions can be made. What is, you know, if we could hear more about what is the liability of the steering committee, NPA, if we are complacent in someone being harassed, because it does, for me, kind of start feeling like it steps into that realm where someone is just asking you to call them. It would be like someone saying, this is my name, and you just refuse to call them by that name, which is, you know, so I'd just like to know, like, what is the legal ramifications of not respecting another steering committee member for specific, very things like this, whether it's race, gender. It would just be really helpful to have that spelled out.
I was just gonna respond to your question, Carmen, about liability. You did email me about that, and Jared, the acting city attorney, is looking into that right now, and whether that liability insurance does cover steering committee members. So if that's specifically the question you're asking, it's in the works of getting you an answer.
Okay, I appreciate it. I know like the city attorney's got tons going on. And you said that we don't have liability insurance, and that's something that I'm going to be chatting with members of my steering committee about getting liability insurance so that we aren't at risk of being sued.
I just want to revise that. Sorry, Carmen. We're still trying to confirm whether or not the steering committee members of the NPAs fall under the city's liability insurance.
Jonathan?
I'm going to try to make this rant a little bit short, but it comes with a little history. Back 20 years ago, I was on a school board in the county, and it was at a time when at the time we thought there were an undue number of school shootings going on. We didn't know how bad it would get. But at the time, there was talk about putting, in the community, there was talk about putting metal detectors at the front doors of the schools. You may remember that this was a conversation that happened at the time. And my superintendent was adamant about not doing it because the metal detectors creates an environment that hurts education, that hurts learning, that hurts teaching. It changes the community when you do something like that. My concern here is that this, and I'm hearing it in this conversation, that, and I'm not saying there's not a problem. There was a problem with shooting in schools, but my concern is that we're going to create some kind of infrastructure that's going to take community, neighborhood, friendliness, consideration for each other out of the process of the NPAs, because we're trying to protect a certain aspect of our community, which is what metal detectors would have done. That worries me a lot. I hope that after we have this conversation, it kind of backs away and we kind of forget that the infrastructure is in place so we don't have to worry about it anymore. Because it's it's very disturbing to me to think that we're building these walls to protect people, where what the NPA is there for is it's for openness, it's for accessibility, it's for belonging. And most of the people who come to NPA meetings, I would venture to say 95% of people who come to NPA meetings feel that it's about community. So that's my concern.
Any other further comments on this? Questions? I'll just put on the Ward 3 hat for a moment and say, I really appreciate the support from the city's attorney's office and their willingness to review this and work with us on this issue. I think that as we talked about at the last meeting, there's some question about the legal status of the NPAs, and wishing to get a better handle on that. I actually went back and talked to a member of our community who served on the city council and actually voted on the resolution. And that individual assured me that the intent behind the NPAs was that we were intended to be an independent voice of the community, separate from the city government and not under the umbrella of CEDO or any other city department. So I think for Ward 3, we've pretty much met the spirit of the resolution, if not the intent. And I think, as evidenced by the fact that the Wards 2 and 3 bylaws were used, I think is the sample for the sample bylaws that came about. So I think, to the extent that the city is working to ask the NPAs, we'll get a lot farther, but I don't think that Ward 3 sees ourselves as part of city government, so. Sure. Carol.
So my bet is that when the legal language comes from the city attorney, that we should have more conversation together. To just deliver language is probably not going to be as helpful as understanding what its implication means and to answer questions that we may have, that Carmen has raised and other folks have raised.
Thank you. That's a wonderful point. And I can only make a suggestion because, we're trying to get back to the role where, for a certain time, we were scheduling all boards meetings, but in reality, that should come from you to us. We're here is to help, to assist you. And so, but my suggestion would be to have another meeting in February of all wards to discuss the bylaws and discuss the process. We will have more legal language for you, so there'll be more specificity. And then we are here to serve your needs.
Thank you. If there's not any further questions or discussions on this topic, we'll move on to the overview of the Vermont open meeting laws and best practices. Do we want to try?
Chris, can we do the con plan?
Yeah, that we got to circle back. Yeah, let's do the comp plan. Thanks for the reminder there, Ryan.
Rebecca, are you available?
I am. Thank you, Fosca. Thanks all for letting me join you for a couple minutes. I'm going to do a pretty quick presentation. Shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes, and then we'll have an opportunity to get some feedback and thought from you all. 1 second while I set up to screen share. Okay. So just bringing in a different energy and perspective for a moment. As I said, my name is Rebecca. I am the Housing Programs Manager for the City of Burlington. And I'm going to ask you all to join me again for a couple of minutes to think about and look at the city's consolidated plan for housing and community development. So this is a plan that the city conducts every 5 years. So we last completed it in 2018. Okay, cool. If you have any questions, please speak them because I cannot see you all while I'm screen sharing. So yeah, please just hop in with any questions or comments you might have. Like I said, I'll do a brief overview and then I'm going to take a couple minutes to collect feedback and thoughts from you all. The consolidated plan is a very large document wherein we look at conducting a needs assessment, which is part of what we're going to talk about tonight, looking at a market analysis of what's happening in the city of Burlington, and then we build a strategic plan for how we will be prioritizing resources. And specifically, these are federal resources. The city of Burlington receives non-competitive funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development every year. And there are two forms of funding we receive. We receive the Community Development Block Grant, which y'all might have heard of as CDBG, and that's about $730,000-ish per year. And then we also receive funds that are titled Home Funds or Home Investment Partnership Program, and that's around $430,000 annually that the city receives. So it's just about $1 million that we get in non-competitive funding, which means we don't have to apply every year. That we certainly have to do reporting and do this report and such, but it's something that we get through the federal government. And the report I'm working on, or the plan I'm working on, will be looking at the time period of July of 2024 all the way through the middle of 2029. So starting this winter, we've been doing a community needs assessment and have been speaking and meeting with some of you in this room, actually, as well as lots of community partners, providers, folks who are experiencing hardship and difficulties. And February 12th, we are hoping to join City Council and hold a formal public hearing at that time. In April, we'll have a draft of our plan for public comment. And then in May, we will submit the final plan to HUD, hopefully for approval for our funding that will start this summer. I already mentioned the financials that we receive out of this plan and that we receive directly from HUD, but here you can see the more specific numbers. I'm going to zip right through this. You guys will have access to these slides and this data through FOSCA. So here I am at the feedback section and just want to let you all know what we're doing to collect feedback, hear from you all tonight, and then also hear from you where you think we should be doing additional outreach and communication. So we've conducted a fair number of organizational interviews, and we're trying to run the gamut of service providers, community folks. So spoke with this week I've spoken with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont, with the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility, with folks from CVOEO. So just kind of like a wide range of providers. There have been meetings with individuals, so folks who are experiencing homelessness, folks who are residents of Burlington. We'll be continuing to do outreach at the shelters, at the food shelf, at some community centers. There's an online survey. There's a link here, and I'll make sure Fosca gets you the link as well. Encourage and ask you all to fill that out. And if you look at the very bottom of this slide, you'll see that kind of word mashup, and that is feedback that we have received to date from the survey in regards to written in comments that people have made. So for example, we can all see the word housing is largest among that word bubble, and that indicates that in written comments, folks have provided the highest level of commentary around a need for housing in terms of a priority for Burlington. Let me get back so I can see you all. That was pretty quick, eh? So my intention of meeting with you is to give you a heads up that we're doing this, that we're engaged in it. Either myself or Fosco or Scott will be presenting at the individual NPA meetings in February, possibly late January, but I think mostly in February. But did want to hold just a couple minutes. I know y'all are, we're running a little behind on the agenda, but just to see if you had any immediate reactions or thoughts around what are priorities for Burlington, where our greatest needs, and then secondary to that, if you know of either a group that you represent or that you feel we might have missed or not be aware of in the city that you want to make sure that we're connecting with directly and asking for feedback and input on what are priorities for the city. And I don't know if I was that explicit about it, but basically the needs assessment we do and the feedback we receive from folks will dictate and direct how we expend the funds that we receive through the federal government, as well as how we prioritize our efforts, our time as city employees.
Thanks so much. Just a couple thoughts. One is that it's mid-January at this point. Either wards have held their January meetings or have planned their agendas. We also have a big election coming up in March, so the February meeting is out for a lot of folks. I don't want to speak for the NPA, other folks here, but we generally need a little bit more warning than this to get this onto an agenda. And in the spirit of actually giving people time to plan to come to an NPA and give their feedback, we really need time. So just want to, I don't know if we can get this on the agenda in Ward 5 before February 12th. I think it's incredibly unlikely because our meeting is tomorrow. So just want to have full disclosure about that. And if you haven't chatted with folks at Burlington Housing Authority buildings, I'm sure they would really love to share their experiences. They have been tremendously neglected by all of the entities that should be paying attention to them and are really feeling a lot of the struggle that I'm sure you're seeing elsewhere.
Any other comments? Right.
Quick question. This is more specific to the grants themselves. Can they go only towards new housing projects, or can they go to like permit or zoning reform or anything like that?
That's a great question. I will own, I don't have a lot of expertise. I've been in my role for a couple months, so gaining and growing in that regard, as well as I've inherited what is happening to date versus what plans are for moving forward. So I could look into that. My general impression is that the intention is less towards, internal funding, right, for things. Sure. And yet, in as much as the funds maybe don't need to go there, as much as the community can identify barriers to housing. So I think maybe if I'm inferring what you're asking is that it's not just about building housing, it's also about how are we using the housing we have? What is the parameters around gaining housing or creatively changing up our existing resources and such? Is that?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And then, if I may, and Lena, that's a good point. And I'm wondering, Rebecca, if maybe if we don't do a presentation, what we can do is we can be there to hand some handouts out at the beginning that people can take home and fill the survey out on their own time. I do know at one point we had some handouts with some physical dots. maybe we can hand those out at the meeting and people at their leisure can put their inputs in, and then we can get that data back to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, definitely. And we are communicating the survey on Front Porch Forum. Thank you. I mean, that is helpful to know around the timeline. Waiting until March makes it a little tight for us for our reporting timeline, but I think that's another thing. If you have an NPA that is really engaged or would want to weigh in, and just again to acknowledge that the timeline's too tight to get in a space for feedback in February, we could still collect feedback into March.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any further comments or questions on this topic? All right. Thank you for your presentation. We'll
Thanks,
move
all.
on to the overview of the Vermont open meeting law and best practices, and that'll be Fosca and Scott.
I think just quickly, maybe going over that. Is that all right, you think?
Yeah, we'll just, we didn't really have a major presentation plan for this. And I know with timing, maybe we'll just take a brief look into this. We do have a link to the Vermont Secretary of State's guidelines, which does contain an exhaustive explanation of open meeting laws. I know there has been a summary of open meeting laws discussed previously. We're certainly happy to try to answer any questions tonight if people have them. A big rule of thumb for me, so that an NPA doesn't cross the line. If you have real questions about whether something violates an open meeting law, stop, delay it, ask for feedback. We can certainly speak with the city attorney's office if we can't answer that. But with that, if there's just any basic questions about open meeting law, we're happy to address those.
Yeah, and before we end this, I'm just gonna add one or two other things about when we'll need to receive agendas and meeting minutes to comply with Vermont open meeting law, but if there's any questions before that, we can answer those.
There's a hand up on the screen.
Dale, do you have your hand up?
Thanks. Yeah, I have a question, which is whether the open meeting law applies to our steering committee meetings as well as to our actual NPA meetings.
Yeah, so from my understanding, as long as you do not go into anything substantive that is planned to be on the agenda during your steering committee meeting, then it does not need to follow open meeting requirements. Again, that means that your steering committee meeting is namely solely for the purpose of planning the next meeting, putting agenda items on, but that you shouldn't be engaging in any large debate or discussion about those items. That would be, about their content. That would be the business of the body of the NPA.
So, for example, at our last steering committee meeting, we talked quite a bit about how to update our bylaws. And we talked about what we would want to bring to the NPA to discuss. We have Ward 6 has bylaws that were adopted, I don't know when, that are in existence right now. And we talked about whether we should just use those and amend them, or whether we should start fresh with the sample that CEDO had provided. We did not post that as an open meeting. It was, 3 of us on a Zoom. I'm wondering if that should have somehow been posted, and if so, I don't think I have any idea how we would have done that.
Thank you, Dale. Yeah, this is one of those ones where it's tough, and the MPAs are kind of a unique situation. I would say that type of discussion should be held at an open board meeting, where you're starting getting to some of those substantive decisions. We can help you with this. You can warn a steering committee meeting if you would like, and just as long as the public is warned and is able to attend that meeting, you could do that as well. But I would, for these steering committee meetings that are not warned, I think the best policy would say we are going to discuss changes to our bylaws at the next meeting, and then leave the discussion at that, like yes or no, would be probably the best course of action.
Can I ask a question that built off of that, what Dale had mentioned? Because one thing that I feel is that we as a steering committee have an obligation to facilitate the NPA meeting efficiently. And with the bylaws specifically, I know that we had a similar conversation, and we felt that the best way to facilitate the conversation is we had to plan a little bit of what our proposed changes were and how we would talk about it. So to the point, there was some discussion, but it was not to stop discussion at the MPA meeting. It was rather to ensure we were facilitating and introducing discussion from the MPAs, because I feel that if we come kind of unprepared to talk about it as a steering committee, that doesn't really open the floor for a great conversation from the NPA as a whole. So I don't super have a question there. I just wanted to kind of highlight that as it complicates the gray area a little bit.
That's exactly the situation we were in, Lauren. Thanks for describing it so well.
Sure, we'll get some clarification here.
Eric Ramakrishnan from the City Attorney's Office. I guess what I'll say is, if you're going beyond just agenda setting, your meeting should be warned, and you can't take any action on something that wasn't warned. So it's not to say you can't discuss. If it was a warned meeting, it's not to say you can't discuss substantive items, but you can't take action on substantive items unless it was warned. So if you think you might talk about substantive things at your steering committee meeting, just warn the meeting. And if you didn't warn an issue, don't take action on it. Does that make sense?
I'm just a little bit unclear about how we can efficiently set an agenda if we can't discuss some of the matters a little bit to understand how we will talk about them in the future.
So the safest course is just to warn your steering committee meetings.
All three of you use those words, and I don't think we have a clear definition.
Okay, so the warning is you post the agenda on.
It's what do the words mean? Substantive action. What do those words mean?
Okay. So
for an NPA.
Substantive is you're going beyond just setting the agenda. Setting the agenda, the public meeting law specifically says you can do other than at a warned meeting. If you're doing anything beyond setting an agenda, it's substantive. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm not sure. So we had I'm sorry. So we had a situation where we wanted to discuss the MOU with UVM that is being discussed right now across the way. We had to have a conversation as to whether we wanted to invite UVM or not. Is that substantive? It's the agenda item is conversation with the city planners and CEDO about the MOU. The city planner and CEDO said, do you want to invite the university to attend? Does that become substantive?
I would say it probably quickly becomes substantive. So if do we want to invite UVM? Yes or no? Okay, great. But that discussion is almost inevitably going to cut to the merits, right? And then it's become substantive. So
cutting to the merits.
Yes, yes. And taking action is taking a vote that has some practical impact on it. So
Okay, we'll go with Sam, followed by Ryan.
I know at the last All Wards meeting, we discussed kind of the responsibility of MPAs and the steering committee and what that relationship to the city looks like. And I think this is a continuous confusion, at least for me, and maybe this is just because I'm new to my position. But I feel like this just gives us a party hat and is just like, bring presenters to your neighborhoods, have people present, and then that's kind of all we would be doing as steering committee members versus, yeah, how Jonathan was saying, we had a discussion on if we wanted UVM to be there or not. And especially for Ward 1, that is a very sensitive thing. And I have gotten that, and I've been lucky enough to get the history of what the relationship of Ward 1 and UVM is and what that city relationship is as well. And I think I think
kind of pertaining to what Jonathan was saying, there should maybe be a different definition of what substantive it is, because I feel like that clouds what steering committee members are even allowed to do for their wards. And I feel like, and maybe that's just me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm loath to belabor the point, but it strikes me that just setting an agenda would be in and of itself substantive. Like, you know, let's say I really am in favor of this park and we have a crowded meeting next meeting, and I'm going to really argue and debate to get this park on the agenda. And like, that's just in of itself setting the agenda, but now it's become this whole debate. And so I don't, or maybe I don't like a project and I'm like, oh, we can push that to next month. So even the setting of the agenda, I mean, it just strikes me that we should warn steering committee meetings, but then that becomes quite cumbersome.
It would be the best practice, certainly. Just do it.
Yeah.
And on the same token, if the NPA is really just a receptacle for city agencies to come and check the box of public engagement, then what is the point of having a steering committee at all? This is, if we're gonna have community meetings that are independent from the city structure, then we should have community meetings that are light enough and not bureaucratic, so that we can actually do the thing that we're here to do. If like, the closer we get to this requiring the threshold of XYZ qualification to meet standards.
Could you please speak into the microphone?
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. Just the closer we get to needing to warn the steering committee meeting, which I'll speak for myself, is already really hard to plan. Like, are we inviting people to these meetings? I don't think people want to come to these meetings. That's why they're not on the steering committee. Like, creating structures that aren't helpful isn't actually furthering democracy. It's just wasting people's time. And the last thing I want to do is waste people's time because I want them to come to my NPA. So I'm struggling to understand, like, what is the goal here? Is the goal transparency? Because I think we can achieve that without making a million rules for how we actually run the meetings and make the agendas and decide how the NPAs are run. And like, if we're so sensitive to individual NPA culture that we're worried about having the same bylaws, like, how are we getting tangled in this for agendas, which are so much more related to the stuff of the meeting than the bylaws? It just feels like the standard is not uniformly applied. And I feel the more we talk about this, the less I understand how to conduct myself as a steering committee member.
I'm gonna, before I move on to Lauren online, I'm gonna defer to Charlie Giannone here, former Ward 3 steering committee member.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful if the city were to say, why is this suddenly an issue with the city? The last time the city brought this up was about 12 years ago, when Gene Bergman from the city attorney's office came to an all wards meeting and said it was crucial for the MPAs to follow the open meeting law. Okay, which later I spoke to Deb Markowitz, the Secretary of State, and she kind of laughed, frankly. But so it would be helpful if the city were to tell us what has happened to suddenly rise this to the level of needing to be seriously addressed at the NPAs at this time. Thank you.
The city want to respond to that? Mr. Attorney?
It's on the agenda and I was asked a question and I answered the question based on my understanding of state law. That's really all I can say in response to that question.
I think we saw Lauren, now I'm seeing Jess.
Before Carmen has been raising her hand online. So I just want to, I have a question, but Carmen has been raising much longer than me.
All right, we'll go with Carmen then. Sorry about that. My vision's kind of bad.
It's okay. I don't know how to make that little hand thing appear. Thank you. One thing that I asked about was, I asked about subcommittees, because I want to have, and this relates to what you're all discussing here, is because I want to have a committee of people who work on the meals. But I'm told that we would have to have Channel 17 attend a subcommittee on meal preparation selection, which seems a little, I don't think that's real. I just, and I'm bringing it up because I'm questioning it. So I think subcommittees could be utilized. They can be warned with an agenda. Like I can say, this is what we're going to discuss. The public is welcome to come and cook with us if they would like, or discuss the agenda, the meal. But I don't, being told that Channel 17 has to attend every subcommittee was a little bit shocking to me. So I would appreciate if you would tell me if that's true.
Carmen, I'm not sure, maybe we misunderstood each other, but I think when you were talking about subcommittees, I understood it in the context of subcommittees working on bylaws, and other aspects that are business of the public body. So I think in that sense, those meetings would need to be warned because they would need to follow open meeting law. But I don't
I have
know
no
that
problem with them being warned, but being told that Channel 17 has to attend even if we were a subcommittee to just work on bylaws and it was open to the public, we properly warned it. I read the open meeting laws and it doesn't say anything about Channel 17 attending.
I think that has to
So
do
is that a
the-
city thing?
I'm unsure. Maybe Scott can speak to this.
You know, for something as subcommittee, you know, Channel 17 wouldn't have to attend those. Really, they're there to promote the, you know, the main MPA meetings, and so we're appreciative of that partnership. You know, even here tonight, it wasn't necessarily mandated that this be recorded and televised. I'm happy it is, but it wasn't mandated. So with the subcommittee, no, you don't need to have channel well, CCTV or, you know, to be there as well. So don't worry about that. But again, I will sort of, you know, go on with the city attorney's office is advising to us. Probably best practice is to warn your steering committee meetings. I'll go and say with Lena, I don't think there's a lot of people who really want to attend. So I don't expect you'll get a full house, but at least you'll know you protected yourself, which is good.
So we're gonna go with Lauren, and I think it looked like Erica and then Molly, or did I get the two of you backwards?
I have a short question.
All right, Lauren, you're up.
I also have a short question. I know I've talked a lot. My question, I guess, is I agree with what everyone has said, and my hesitation here is we are voted on as steering committee members. We go in front of our wards and our MPAs and ask them to vote us on, and they are voting us with the responsibility that we are steering what is on the agenda. And to the point of, you know, people probably won't attend, fine, but I view some of this as fundamentally changing what the steering committee is doing. And that is something, if that is going to happen, if the city is telling us we must do this to comply with open meeting law, fine. This is just far too gray and fuzzy for me to feel comfortable with of how we act going forward. So I just wanted to say that.
And since Lauren added on to my comment last time, I'm just going to say, likewise, we've had lots of steering committee meetings in my living room. And when you talk about the bylaws kind of reflecting the ethos of each individual NPA, I'm not having a publicly warned, open to the public meeting in my living room. So it would change how we meet significantly. If we ever wanted to meet in person, we'd have to find a place to do that. And that's kind of a big pain.
We can try to get some clarity on everything you've all been bringing up and get back to you about it. Yeah, thank you for all the issues you're raising.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Faulkner. I use she, her pronouns. I came a little late, sorry. And I'm with Ward 2 on Decatur Street. I guess I just had a couple questions. I was unable to attend last All Wards just because they were kind of announced last minute. And I had flights booked that day. So I'm wondering if you guys could tell me how long should we be warning the meetings?
48 hours.
48 hours. Okay. Interesting.
My question was just, what is the definition of warning? Like,
Yeah.
what is
Yes.
this process that you mean when you say that word?
You can go ahead if you want.
Typically, you could share the agenda with staff and they could post it online. That's the primary way that the meeting is warned. You're supposed to technically post the agenda at the location where the meeting will be held and 2 other places nearby. So I'm on my town's planning commission, and if I post an agenda, the laundry mat is open 24 hours a day and there's a bulletin board there. That's one of my 2 places. The post office is another one. That counts, if that makes some sense.
I had one other question off of your definition. If we're meeting to set an agenda, how do we have an agenda to give them? Like, that's just like logistically, I just don't understand. Sorry. I'm not trying to be finicky at all. I promise. I'm just, yeah.
And again, I mean, if you are purely setting the agenda
Okay.
and you're not venturing into substantive issues, then it does not have to be warned. It's just that it would be a best practice if you think that the conversation is going to become substantive. I'm recommending as a best practice that you should warn to protect yourself.
And then also, I'll think my question through a little bit more, actually.
Any further, Sam?
I just wanted to make a comment on to both of you guys. Obviously the whole idea of going into our steering committee meeting to set an agenda is to just set the agenda, but I think that a lot of, I'm just speaking for our ward, but a lot of it is spontaneous. The conversations that we have are spontaneous, so there's really no way that we could warn something that we don't know is actually going to happen. That just is confusing to me.
And I appreciate that. I didn't write the law.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear about that. And that's why I'm just saying, as a best practice, my recommendation to you, and I understand it may be more complicated than I'm imagining, but my recommendation to you would be, if you warn it, then you've covered yourself.
Jessica and then Molly.
Oh, actually, Molly had her hand up earlier.
No, I already said my question.
A couple questions. So we, on our NPA website, we post steering committee meetings. The steering committee meets on the last Thursday of every month at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Is that sufficient to have it publicly posted in that way? I guess there would need to be information about where, but is that sufficient?
And you should identify what's going to be on the agenda. And if the standing agenda item is to set the agenda for the next meeting, I think that's fine. It doesn't give you permission to take action on a different topic, but it gives you, you've invited the public into the conversation.
And are there examples of other groups that are affiliated with the city or not, that would not fall under this type of open meeting laws for something like a steering committee meeting? I'm just wondering if there's another way to define the NPA steering committees to make it possible to have the type of planning conversations and other discussions that happen more spontaneously at steering committee meetings without having to have a warned agenda listing them first.
I mean, off the top of my head, I don't have any feedback on that. I apologize.
Okay, just asking. And we understand that it's your job to tell us what the rules are, and it's our job to decide whether to follow them or not. Thank you.
I'm gonna keep it short, I promise. I just want to say, from an equity perspective, the more this gets burdensome, the harder it is for people to do. All due respect, I'm not retired. And I know that a lot of people who are on the steering committees of their NPAs are able to give a lot of time, which is amazing, and a lot of people are not. And the more we make this a challenging thing to do well from the perspective of rule following, in addition to the perspective of community building, the less we are inviting people of diverse identities and economic situations to actually participate. And that, I think, is to the detriment of the NPA and the detriment of our community. So just want to encourage, it's been really unclear to me over the course of this conversation, what are we protecting ourselves from? And I'm a volunteer. What are you going to do to me if I don't warn my meeting? It doesn't feel like we're having this conversation seated in a reality that we are all living in. And I'm going to have a lot less trouble following the rules if I understand why they exist.
I think everything everyone's bringing up is, really important, and I would urge you to bring these conversations and these thoughts up to your city councilors, because NPAs were formed through a city council resolution, right? City council also passed the resolution that is now prompting all this bylaw work. There's only so much we can do, right, to follow what they have required of NPAs, but I think it's a really important question, right? Having formed as kind of an entity related to the city, a commission, I believe, it complicates things, I think, but I think what you're bringing up is a really important point, and I'm sure your city councilors would be interested to hear.
I guess, how does the planning commission, the development review board, how do they set their agendas? How does the council, for that matter, set their agenda? If we decided that setting an agenda is cause for public meeting law to be invoked, there's a ton of meetings upstairs that happen all the time, and I haven't been warned about any of their agenda setting meetings. And that doesn't require a response. It just, they're not accomplishing much upstairs, but it's a separate issue. They can set an agenda at least.
Yeah, it's tough, and I suspect they're following the advice of the city attorney, and they're keeping it to specific discussions of what's going to be on the agenda. People, certainly at planning commission level, you get a lot of training on open and public meeting laws. I've been on.
Could we get that same advice?
I think that's I think that's what we're going to try to do here and get some more training. There's some really good information on the Secretary of State site. I've been on appointed boards before as well, and in the case of one of them, we were advised, it was a housing board, not to discuss housing with anybody outside of even who was on the committee. So, and that's just what we did. So, you can keep it just to the agenda. And I mean, it is hard because you're going to want to talk about other things.
Not to engage in a back and forth, but if you're putting things on or setting even the order of the agenda, if it's a long meeting, you could put something at 11:30 if you want it to get knocked off. The setting of the agenda, I mean, if you're really not discussing anything, then it can just be an email. You know what I mean? If you're not allowed to discuss anything, then here's somebody dreams it up. Here's the agenda, and there's no debate over it. So yeah, not.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Any further question? Looks like Hank, you have a discussion or a question, comment?
Yeah. I find this whole meeting to be really demoralizing. I know that I'm brand new, and I don't know the history of the conflicts that have led to the city's perceived need to bind everybody by some very, very specific and rigid practices, policies, and procedures. But it's not the kind of jumping into community affairs that I was hoping to be doing by joining the NPA. And if it becomes just a bureaucratic morass, I'm not interested. But it's just hard to hear how far it's gone. We're in an exceedingly litigious society, but the idea, the spirit of the NPA that I understand from reading about its history is exactly the opposite of that. This is not about how can I screw my neighbor best. It's about how can I know my neighbor better, and the rigidity and the requirements don't add to that. They detract from it. Just my feeling.
Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to, I guess, the way I'm understanding or trying to get a sense of in terms of this agenda setting as, what we'll do as in our own steering committee meetings. And it's bringing up the game guest 2. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that, but you only get to ask yes or no questions. And I don't know if that is how kind of the rule is supposed to be followed in terms of setting the agenda. And of course, that's kind of the baseline. There's always going to be a little bit of conversation. I guess when you make rules, you expect that some of them will be bent, maybe not completely broken, but we obviously have to conversate a little bit to be able to be on the same page. And I think Lauren brought up, we are steering the agenda. But would that does that sound correct in terms of being able to follow the rules? And when we're having our steering committee meetings, sort of keeping it to yes or no questions as a baseline.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, and the reason I keep using the term best practice is we're getting into sort of legal gray areas here. There aren't always clear yes or no answers to some of these legal questions. And I just want to be clear, the city isn't trying to impose some new bureaucratic rules on you. The question was asked under state open meeting law. Somebody said, do we have to warn our meetings if we're going to get into substantive discussions of the issues? And if you're going to get into substantive discussions of the issues, then I would say, yes, the best practice to make sure you're coloring within the lines is to warn the meetings. But I'm not trying to impose a new rule on you. I'm not proposing to police you. I'm just answering the question that was posed to comply with state open meeting law.
Any other questions on this? I just wanted to say that this has been a very robust discussion here, and I'm sorry, Mark. Mark, are you there?
I am, thank you. I just wanted to just chime in real quick on this because it's so entertaining to watch, and I just I can hardly hold myself back from it. And really just to applaud the folks that are pushing back a little bit, just really just seeking understanding. These public meeting laws, in my opinion, and with my experience, they are colonialism, and it's really, it comes from patriarchy, it comes from racism, it's baked into the system, and I just qualify racism with systemic, and these are challenges that we're wrestling with. And I'm on committees. I've served on the police commission. I've served, I'm serving on the Health Equity Advisory Commission as the co-chair right now at the statewide level. And so there's, and I just appreciate so much the pushback that I'm hearing, especially particularly from folks who maybe haven't had these experiences before. There are many examples. I mean, executive session, and it just goes all the way down the list. It's just any way that you can exclude people or make it difficult. Public hearing, let me talk at you for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, and I'm not going to respond. So there's all kinds of different ways that we have to navigate. In some ways, using the same process. I think sometimes some of these rules, and I'm no lawyer, and the city has plenty of them, but sometimes you can go in and actually vote to actually either like supersede or to circumvent, or I guess the word I'm looking for is to suspend, if you will, any or all of them as a democratic body. And there's just ways to get around it, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to lecture anybody or anything like that. I just wanted to really express just a deep appreciation for the pushback that I'm hearing, because, so often and for so long, we've seen so many people just, as lemmings, just go, yeah. And they just go along with the program without giving it any thought, thinking about how many people are actually being excluded from the process, or how difficult it makes it for many people to participate in the process. So I'm 100% with the folks who have expressed concern, and I hope that this that our oh, by the way, I'm with Ward 1. I hope our folks continue to struggle to push back and to question authority and to challenge when it doesn't make sense, particularly for your constituents. So thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Hughes. Yeah, as I was saying, I think that we've had a very robust discussion. It was very encouraging to me personally. I think that what we saw here tonight, it really evokes the spirit and intent of what the NPAs are designed to be. And I'm glad that we were able to have this discussion. Seeing all the different points and all the potential challenges that they're riding with, I think very clearly illustrates the point of why Ward 3 has taken the position that we are an unincorporated association of private individuals. But based on the discussion that we've heard tonight, it would appear that the city is still taking the position that we are a part of the city government. And I think that a plain reading of the resolution would suggest otherwise. So I guess the question I would have for our city attorney is, what is the legal basis upon which the city is making a claim that the NPAs are in fact a part of the city government under the CEDO umbrella? And I'm asking this because if the NPAs are do fall under that, then yes, they do need to follow the open meeting law. But if they are an unincorporated association of private individuals, the open meeting law would not apply. But I would hope that as a community organization, they would certainly adopt those principles of transparency and do their best to comply. But I'm just kind of curious upon what the legal basis is for the city's claim here.
So I feel like I'm perceiving that this feels like a little bit of a debate between y'all and me, and I didn't mean for it to become that. My goal was just to give my best legal answer to a legal question that was posed. And so if I just want to say that to begin. But I guess just very briefly, and I don't want to go much further into this because I'm not trying to debate anyone here. The NPAs were created by city council action, and that's the bottom line here. And I'll just leave it at that.
I appreciate the answer. I'm just going to simply say that the city as a whole seems to be taking this position. Now, this is now the second meeting in a row where we've had a representative from the city's attorney's office who has not been able to speak to this. So that kind of suggests to me that the city is not really prepared. So if we're going to continue to have this debate, I would ask that the city come prepared to answer these questions the next time, because otherwise we're just going to be going around and round in circles.
Chris, thank you for that. And I'll speak with my leadership at CEDO and, maybe we can have something more clarification, under our understanding, our role here at CEDO and our role as staff is simply to support the NPAs. We in essence, we work for you and it shouldn't be looked at as any other way. But certainly I think we can work to get a clarification of the city. And this is something that certainly you can talk to more more openly with your elected officials.
Thank you, Scott. So I think we've had a robust discussion. We can move on to the next agenda item,
which is NPA expectations of city council administration.
I kind of feel like these two topics have bled together. So I'd like to make a motion to, skip over this since they're kind of together in an instance of time. I'll, as a chair, I probably shouldn't make the motion. So I'll ask for a motion.
Motion to move on to mayoral candidate forum update.
No.
Okay. So. All right.
Oh, right. There's a resolution. Sorry,
yeah. I didn't realize that this was the item attached to the resolution. So I think the resolution is included in the packet. I know that it came out of Ward 1 originally. We took the ball and ran with it at Wards 2 and 3 and also adopted it, I think, verbatim. I would now defer to the folks from Ward 1 to speak to that as the originator of the resolution.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be quick. I crafted a lot of this. Lena crafted a lot of it. For clarity, what this is it's a piece of writing to be submitted to the city council for them to do something with. They can rewrite it. They can it's not a resolution really from the NPA. It's a proposal that the city council make a resolution to do this. And specifically, based on the founding document of the NPAs, the proposal is in this resolution that the city council and NPAs in some form meet to establish some processes and criteria for determining the municipal issues on which NPAs must be consulted for advice and input prior to city council plans. And I think this was motivated, this has been a conversation for a while, but it was motivated to begin with by what motivated a lot of this conversation was that many NPA members, steering committee members and residents had no idea that the city council was voting on something that directly affected the operations of the NPAs. And more often decisions get made at city council meetings that NPAs don't have any input to. The NPAs were created for the purpose of providing input to the city council. So really all this is a request that a process be put in place. And this is a city council resolution, mind you. It's not an NPA resolution, but that the city council, with support from the NPAs, puts a process in place to decide whether an issue is substantive enough that NPA should be consulted before the city council votes. And we've talked about it 3 times at Ward 1, but we haven't gotten to a vote yet just because we've had more important things on the agenda. But Ward 3 did have a conversation about this, and there were a couple of comments. Jess, you had a comment that NPA isn't really totally representative of the community. That's absolutely true. Nevertheless, the city council established the NPAs for this reason. So the fact that we don't really represent the whole community is important, but it doesn't prevent this from going forward. What it means is we have to do a better job of getting more people in. And Milo, I think, had a comment about the fact that even the city council isn't kept abreast of when decisions are being made. It's very hard to know. That too isn't really germane to this kind of a resolution. So I bring this forward. And thank you, Lena, for updating the language a bit. And I don't really know I would propose, because this is something that we would send to city council for them to do with what they will. It could be every NPA votes for it. It could be that the steering committee votes for it. It could be that one individual writes it and sends it to the city council. It doesn't really matter. We just want to make sure that this is a way that the city council gets something that they can have some consideration about. So I'm wide open in terms of next month. We will vote on this at Ward 1. I think it would be great if other NPAs voted on it. If you don't, so be it. But it just makes a louder voice when more residents speak on a subject. It shouldn't be controversial. It's really very simple. It's the city council. We do this thing, and actually one of our city councilor candidates raised the point that even today there is a component to city council the ordinances that says that any development in a community has to come to the NPA before it goes on with the planning commission, one of the boards, and that's great, but it's very limited in terms of it. So there's the precedence of that. This is really just to decide what else besides those should come to NPAs, and that's really all there is. Happy to answer questions, or we can move on.
Was this intended to be a discussion item, or were we going to vote to adopt this resolution as all wards?
I would be thrilled to vote on it as a resolution for all wards. I wouldn't demand it, but it would be great. It would just add a little bit more weight to it.
If someone were to make a motion to adopt it, we could have a more substantive discussion.
I will make a motion to adopt.
All right. We have a motion on the table to adopt the resolution relating to the relationship between city officials and the neighborhood plan assemblies as introduced by Ward 1 and adopted by Ward 1, 2, and 3 NPAs. Yield the floor to Mr. Chapel Sokol, the sponsor of the resolution.
We'll waive the reading too.
Yes, we'll waive the reading too.
I've said my piece.
All right, going online, I don't know who popped their hand up first. It looks like Dale, so.
I think both Nancy and Carmen had their hands up before I did, just not electronically.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Thank you. I have no idea what this resolution is. I have not read it. I'm really sorry. I just can't vote. I would abstain from voting because I just don't know what it is. And I'm also wondering if it was, we just went through a conversation about properly warning things. So has it been warned that we're going to vote on this?
It's in the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
It's the agenda.
But not as a vote.
But I,
Yeah, how do we?
I can't speak to that. I'd have to.
It seems like maybe we shouldn't vote on it because folks haven't received it, but we can still move it forward in our NPA. That seems like a fair assessment of what's going on. I would love to vote on it, but if people haven't read it, we should vote on it.
Right now, we have a motion on the table to adopt. If you are looking to dispose it, we could. Chair would certainly entertain a motion to postpone or to postpone discussion.
If you withdraw your second.
I withdraw my second.
All right.
All right. Motion has been withdrawn, and there will be no vote on this, nor will there be any discussion because there is not an active vote motion on the table. Moving on.
Well,
I mean, I think we can still talk about it.
If people have questions about the origin of this and our concerns about it, or your concerns about, I mean, I think this is part of what this meeting's about. So I just would be interested.
I'm happy to entertain discussion. Typically in a under Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure, you have to have an active motion before you enter into discussion. But since we're moving it a little more informal today, let's not make it any more cumbersome than it has to be.
Parliamentarian's absent today.
All right. So yes, if there are questions or discussions, it sounded like you may have some comments that you would like to share, Carol. Anybody online have any questions or comments?
I'd be happy to give like the 30-second digest. What it's about is it's really about trying to establish. It is honestly pretty straightforward once you get past all the italics and stuff. It's about trying to establish a set of guidelines for city council and for city administration about when an issue is important enough that NPAs should be consulted on it. And presumably that those guidelines would be written with the support of the NPAs, but it would be a way for city council, for example, to look at a proposed vote and say, or a proposed resolution and say, does this meet the criteria that it should be, that we should get input from NPAs before we vote on it? That's the idea. It's just setting up a process for defining when NPA should be consulted before votes are made at city council. And 90% of the votes, they could just say, no, it's irrelevant. You just want to make sure that the ones that matter actually get to the NPAs for conversation.
Right. Quick comment. I think it's great. Love it. Would support it if it was before us as for a vote. April 1st, 2024 is.
That was just a snarky response to January 31st.
Excellent. In that case, great. So I was like, there's no chance in hell.
Of course.
Yeah.
But again, this is for city council.
Yeah.
Whatever date they want.
Yeah. They often do.
And they often do.
Yes, Molly has her hand up.
Oh, Molly, sorry.
Comment. I appreciate the spirit behind all of it. And I guess the thought bubble that arises in me is, if it goes forward with the council, we'll just have to be really careful about thinking through the ramifications of it. You know, there is a requirement for developers to come to MPAs for development in our neighborhood, which in broad strokes is great. However, in my ward, we've gotten into a situation where we've had to accept the developers being on the agenda multiple times because the project has had small, to the public's eye, inconsequential adjustments, but it's triggered that city requirement and just has taken up time in our agenda where we didn't feel like we wanted to create that much time for this development, but felt like we had to given the requirement. So just a warning that we should think it through how it actually comes into action so that it's using our time well.
That makes perfect sense.
Looks like Lauren has a question online, as does Carmen.
I was raising on behalf of Carmen.
Thank you, Lauren. I think the point that was just made is a very good point, because then you're telling the city, I mean, I haven't read this resolution, so I have no idea, but it sounds like it's going to require charter change. It's going to end up mandating what's on our agenda, if that's what you're talking about. So I am very cautious. I look forward to reading it, but that would be some of the reasons that I would not support it.
I don't think it better not require a charter change. I don't think that this in any way leads the city in terms of requirements with the state or with our charter. I think this is really just an agreement between city council and NPAs as to what's important to know. It shouldn't add anything that the NPAs wouldn't want added.
I would just say that if you look at the committees of the city right now, they're advisory. And if you wanted to make them actually carry weight, you would have to have a charter change. So I think that would be a good thing for you to just check out when you're working on it. It's just something to consider.
Okay. I don't think NPAs become any more than advisory from this. I don't think that changes it. I don't think it gives NPAs any more weight. All it does is it might get issues that ought to come to NPAs in front of NPAs. That's the goal anyways.
Hank?
I looked at the agenda. Was this resolution from Ward 1 in the agenda packet? Because I think as Carmen, I couldn't find it. There were two items that linked to
Yes, it is
other
in the agenda
documents.
packet. Yeah,
So-
Hank, it's on page 3 of the agenda packet.
Okay, let me go back to that. All right, thank you. I'll go look at that.
Any further questions? I just wanted to comment and say, I think that the spirit and intent of the resolution is to promote a better understanding and working relationship with the city council, and sitting down with a couple of counselors may prove beneficial in that regard. So perhaps at a future all wards, we may wish to consider to invite some representatives from the council to have that conversation in the spirit of cooperation. All right, moving on to the mayoral candidate forum. I was the one that I think brought that up after speaking with Tom Darenthal from Ward 1 and back in the November meeting. Tom and I have since spoken. Neither one of us really have the bandwidth at this point to kind of lead the charge on that. And there didn't seem to be a lot of, enthusiasm to move that forward at the all wards level. Speaking as an individual steering committee member, I think the intent from my bringing it up was recognizing that the mayoral candidates have a lot of events to attend to begin with, and expecting them to go to potentially 6 different NPA meetings may not be a reasonable expectation or assumption. So the thought was, if we had since the mayor's race is a citywide race, the thought was to have an all wards meeting to make it easier for the candidates so that everyone could come and participate. But unless there's some folks here that want to take the ball and run with it tonight, I think that ship is probably sailed at this point. Okay, it doesn't sound like we're going to have a mayoral debate at the all wards level. Moving on.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know which wards are, in the absence of an all wards mayoral debate, which wards are planning to have their own mayoral forum or debate as part of their February meetings? Is anyone planning to?
I think they're planning on having I heard 6 or 7 different mayor debates already. So I think those,
First one's tonight.
the first one is tonight.
Which we're
So-
missing.
I know, but I think they're live streaming it, so we can always go back and watch. But I think seeing that, it feels less pertinent to have it happen here. I'd rather focus on putting our limited resources and energy into city council races or ballot initiatives that don't seem to get enough coverage. At least that's my thought process.
I have a related question. Because we got an email from Will Emmons asking for time on an agenda as a mayoral candidate. And I would love to get some guidance or other NPA steering committee members' thoughts on how to best respond to a request like that from an individual candidate when other candidates haven't made that request or expressed interest.
Jonathan?
We we very often, and this isn't specifically about mayoral candidates, but when this sort of thing happens, we very often invite them to come to speak out. And they get their 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to say whatever they want to say.
Any further questions or discussions on this agenda item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the owners of action items from the November all wards meeting. Review the action items from the last meeting and assign owners to action item from those missing owners. Scott or Scott, are you prepared to speak to that? I'm certainly not.
Yeah, so I think this was a request I received from at least one steering committee member. But basically you can see in your agenda packet, page 4, the bottom, those were the identified action items from the last meeting. And I believe we had assigned some owners to those, but just want to review with everyone, you know, what the expectations are for all those action items. And I don't know, Jonathan, if you have anything else you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't recognize any owners after the last meeting, so it would be great to put names next to these.
Definitely. Do you want to take the lead, or I can also?
I think maybe a steering committee person with CETO could do that.
Okay.
Or maybe Rachel should be part of it because she took the.
I think Rachel was just there to facilitate. I think from now on, she's not going to necessarily be involved.
Based upon the action just taken, I think we can safely remove the third from the bottom item to host a mayoral debate.
Yep.
Yeah, borrow your pen. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to get in touch if we want to just kind of go through these and see what makes sense.
I'd like to see. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to suggest in process, maybe just from start at the top and read down, have a brief discussion to go through this. I think that the return to the all wards meeting is important. Clearly, we have some bigger issues that do need to be discussed all wards at the city level. I think the question that really needs to be is how frequently do we want to have these meetings and when would we like to have the next one? So I'll open the floor up to discussion and questions about that topic. Jonathan.
Just talking about everything. I'm wondering, and Carol, you're probably the better person to talk about this because you were involved, much more involved in the last round. But I'm just wondering whether there should be a representative from each ward or each NPA group that would get together to work on this sort of thing, work on planning the meetings, maybe doing some non-substantive agenda setting. And just, but maybe it should be a subset of the steering committees of just a rep from every ward to get together and kind of work through this sort of thing.
I'm going to try to apply what I learned from the last meeting and repeat back what you had said as I understood it. So it sounds like what I'm hearing perhaps is to create a steering committee for the all wards meeting for one from each person to address some of these, or is that not your intent?
That sounds great.
Okay.
I love the energy and I would be happy to help support that. I do want to hesitate against having it be so strict where we need to have one person from each ward, just recognizing that some wards have only one member, other wards have like 6 or 7 of us. So it might be a lot more effort for smaller wards to have like someone dedicated coming, whereas maybe a larger ward could maybe put up 2 people, obviously making sure it's still democratic and we're listening to that. But, you know, just making sure like we're wearing the burden evenly and it's not falling onto smaller wards heavier.
We are at the end of the allotted time on the agenda. So we have a few more agenda items. I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules so that we can finish up with the last 2 or 3 items here. Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Hey, can I suggest that we establish a new finish time and not, just so we have an idea what we're going to do 15 minutes or 30 minutes? What am I signing on for here?
We can, if you'd like to make a motion, Hank, whatever you feel would be an appropriate time frame, I think, would be open for consideration.
I'll propose 15 minutes, 7:15.
All right,
Anyone else want to propose a different number? Please go ahead.
and all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay. So back to the action item discussion, the return of the all wards NPA meeting. It sounds like there's some discussion to do in all wards steering committee. Who is next in queue? I'm not seeing any hands. I don't see any.
I guess I
Karen?
would just make a suggestion. I mean, in the past, what's happened is that I have met like with our CETO liaison and set up meetings and agendas with Sam. And then solicited suggestions from people about agendas, and then people came as they could. Maybe what if we can leave today with this item is maybe 1 or 2 people would be interested in volunteering to just take it the next step for us, rather than us trying to thrash out a process.
I'll volunteer to help facilitate the all wards, but I just would like to say that speaking as an individual, I'd like to see it be, because I don't want to be having a different time every month and, same date, same time, consistency for planning, just like the rest of the wards. So for a point of information, to the folks in wards 4 and 7, my understanding is that previously that ward had been meeting on the 4th Wednesday, and now I'm hearing that that may have changed to the 1st Wednesday. Is that a correct understanding? Okay. What is the standard meeting time for wards 4 and 7?
And the fourth Wednesday,
4th Wednesday.
6 to 8.
4th Wednesday. Okay. And ward 8 is now the 4th Thursday.
Yeah, next week.
My recollection when I last looked at the calendar, the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month are typically so maybe the 1st Wednesday. Well, this will be the 3rd, I guess, right? Because the first one's next. We'll figure it out.
Julie, would you be willing to?
I would, however, in my work, I actually coordinate a monthly cocktail hour in Montpelier on the 1st Wednesday of every month. So I could not do a 1st Wednesday, but I would love to maybe send around a doodle poll and find a time so we don't have to spend this meeting discussing that.
That works.
Lovely.
All righty.
2 of you will take it from here.
All right, be in touch. Defining the relationship with the NPA and the city of Burlington, I think that that's probably a larger conversation. I'd like to make the suggestion that perhaps, at our next meeting, we invite the counselors to come and we devote a portion of the lion's share of the meeting to that discussion, perhaps. Any other thoughts on that? Okay. Next on the list is form an NPA bylaws and resolutions committee. We've already been provided with a set of samples from our folks at CETO. Is this still something that folks feel they need to pursue, or do we just want to roll with the process as it's been articulated thus far?
Roll with the process. Think we've got enough tools.
Right. Scott promised us several items that'll be forthcoming that'll help us focus on what needs to be adjusted in the bylaws and what doesn't.
Will do.
There was another, the next item was to establish a communications group. If anyone has any thoughts that they'd like to share on that.
Did we do that?
Oh, I didn't realize there was a Google group.
We weren't, I think wards 2 and 3 were not included in one of the larger Google groups until last week. So we
Yeah.
might have missed a lot of
stuff.
communication. So
I would prefer that, I think it'd be better to have the individuals subscribe to that rather than or in addition to.
Well, I'll catch up on what's happening with the communication group. It is relevant to a topic that's later on the agenda that I think we're probably going to bump because we're out of time. So I'll connect with the group.
All right.
So sorry, is establish a communication group different from utilize the all wards steering committee Google group? Because if we have the Google group, like I thought we were all on it, and it seems like we weren't, which means that it's not useful unless we're all on it.
I think you're all on it now.
Yeah.
Like, is that the communication group?
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought it was a group, a subset of steering committee members who are working as a team to talk about communications and outreach strategies. That's what I interpreted it as. But
that's what I also interpreted.
yes.
Great. I read that, but it seems like we could use that.
Sounds like that's an agenda item for the next meeting.
next time.
I would suggest that with respect to the all wards group, maybe at least one member from each ward be given access to that. So if people come and go, we can add them and avoid that. I don't know who's housing that or overseeing the existing group, but
I believe Jason from Ward 5 created the group, but I believe he made me owner, so I could add Wards 2 and 3 to it because they weren't part of it. But I'm open to whatever you guys think about that.
And there was also there was another, and All Wards NPA Google group that I think Sam created, and there's some documents on the drive, so I'd love for those things to be transferred, so, and delete the old one and go with the new.
Yeah, so
Just to make it a little easier.
if anyone has the password and account info for that, that would be helpful because I can't enter it. That's why I created a new Google Drive, but if anyone can enter it or send me the files,
like a
that would be
call
great.
to Sam. Somebody should have Sam's cell phone around, so should be able to move.
I'll give Sam a call.
I think we've had a very substantive discussion tonight about aligning the non-discrimination policies with the city of Burlington, so I'm not sure that we need to have any further discussion. Okay, CEDO to call its Ward 4 and 7, Ward 8 meetings. It appears that that has been done. The developing of the grievance and data collection process, it sounds like we're waiting for some input from the city. Scott and Foster working on that, so we're good there. We did have a conversation about encouraging newly registered voters to join MPA. There was a suggestion, I think, that was made. I do know that we have at least one steering committee member here tonight that also moonlights on the board of the registration of voters. I don't know if said individual can speak to that.
Yes, I can speak to that. So I reached out to the city clerk, Sarah Montgomery, to ask about if this is something that we would be allowed to do. So she was able to confirm, sorry, I'm just pulling up the email. She says that she believes that it would be legally fine, and she's looking to double check that. There's not anything specifically called out in statute about sending out the letters that would say that it's not. The only caveat, of course, is that they would like to have approval authority over what is being included with the registration letters. So it would basically, if we design a postcard, for instance, or something like that, we would share it with the clerk's office, and they would say yes, no, and then that would get the ball rolling. So I'm happy. I think this kind of constitutes as further discussion because there's also the discussion about funding with this specifically. But I'm happy to kind of be the owner, and maybe if we have time in the next all wards, maybe it would be good to further discuss this in a little bit more detail.
Sounds like this might be a good first agenda item for the communications subcommittee once it has been established at the next group. And then we've already dealt with the mayoral debate. We've already dealt with the Google group. Explores the possibility of hosting community events. That seems like a pretty open and wide-ranging thing, so I will open the floor. Questions, comments, concerns? I think people, oh, Lena.
I think this would be great. Oh, I'll move over here. I think this would be great. And per your comment about how the NPAs don't necessarily reflect our communities, is a reminder that the NPAs used to receive more funding, and it's really hard to put on events without funding. It's also really hard to provide food and childcare and transportation without funding. And I think it's worth advocating for more funding because then we can do our thing that we're supposed to do better. And that's important. So, I mean, if we want to run events with no budget, power to us, but it seems like this is part of it, maybe a broader effort to get some more material support from the city.
Right.
I would definitely urge, I would voice that concern with the city councilors because I believe that is up to their discretion.
Yeah, it could require a resolution, but I wonder, I mean, that we do get funding now, and maybe expanding it, or would be a matter of somebody talking to a city councilor, having them write a resolution.
One thing I'd love to propose, kind of similar to hosting events, but seeing if we could develop some tabling materials and get folks to maybe table at events. If every steering committee member wants to table at like one farmer's market a year, I think we could see a lot more like traffic and helping spreading the word about MPAs and what they are. That's going to require a lot of collaboration and discussion. Right now I'm a little at capacity with work, but in the summertime, I would love to, work on that with a couple folks if anyone's interested.
I'm interested, so I'll work with you.
Jessica, I think you're up for the outreach comic and that'll
Oh,
probably.
sure. Yeah. And this actually follows
Yeah.
quite well from that. And I think we don't have time to have a full discussion, but I wanted to give an update and then share some ideas. So as if the new folks might not even know about this, but last year, as part of the wards 2 and 3 funding allocation, we used some of the money to work with a local artist to create an outreach comic that talks all about the NPAs, why people can get involved, what you can get out of them, how to find your NPA. And it was really intended to be an aspirational document that could get people interested and excited about the NPAs and to see the potential in them as well. And it's a lovely little comic. It's about this big, 12 pages. And connect and then there was also a poster made from the panels. The poster is a little less effective, I think, just because the font's really small and
I love the poster.
yeah, it's sweet, but you have to read it. But the comic is amazing. And thanks to CETO, it has been translated. Well, the text has been translated into 9 different languages or 7? 7 different languages. So this is a really accessible outreach tool that right now we have in printed form in English. We have in both PDF and JPEGs for using online. And then soon-ish, as soon as I have time, we will get the translated language into that document as well. So this is a really great tool that we can all be using to share excitement about the NPAs. So tabling at farmers markets and distributing. And so I think maybe when this communications group is getting together, one of the things we can talk about is how these can be used, because there's a lot of energy and time and resources that were put into creating these documents, and we want to get them out into the world. But I really want to know how all the different NPAs want to receive that information. Are paper copies more efficient? Are digital copies that you can use on social media more useful? How do you envision using the translated materials? And I think there's a lot we can talk about to make sure that we're using this wonderful resource effectively, and also thinking about, well, how does it fit into other NPA branding? Like we have these images that we can use. We don't have to use it just as a comic. We can use pieces of it for different things, and just to help people recognize, some brand recognition for the NPAs as well, keeping in mind that each NPA has its own culture and personality and different ways of doing outreach, but this is a shared tool that we can use. So I just wanted to let folks know what was going on with that project and to see if you had any immediate thoughts, and we can discuss it more next time.
Looks like Hank does have a question online.
Yeah, I just want to know, is it possible for you to send out an email to all the NPA members with a copy of that, a link to the comic, and that way we'd all know what we're talking about? That would just be a very helpful thing.
Absolutely. And that went out with a previous iteration of steering committee members, but that's a really good reminder that things like that need to go out often because there are new steering committee members who join out. So I'll send that out through the new Google Groups email.
Excellent. And the other question I had was, when we were, again, this is from being very, very new, we were told that there's a $2,500 amount granted by the city council to each NPA each year. And have people had trouble staying within that? And is that what we're talking about needing more financial support from the city to be able to have hosting community events?
So just quickly, Hank, actually every ward gets 2,500. So it's 4 and 7. Hopefully you've got $5,000 to use. And I think it makes sense to talk to our city councilors if we want that to be increased. We've struggled at different points with spending it all, but now since we have to pay for our location of meeting and food, that most of the money goes towards that.
Any further discussions before we entertain a motion to adjourn?
Just a couple things. The first thing, while we're talking about money for the MPAs, Ward 1 needs more money than any other ward because that's the only ward that has to pay for their meeting space. So $1,200 comes out of their $2,500, just like that. Okay, so they need more support than any other MPA.
That's at the Friends.
That's the Friends Meeting House.
Interesting.
The only other thing that I was going to add before Carol, just to get it in. So the best time to schedule all wards meetings or special ward meetings is if you look for the 5th Wednesday or the 5th Thursday of a month, because they're all open and all the CETO staff and all the CCTV staff are available. So if you want to have future meetings, 5th Wednesdays and 5th Thursdays. Thank you. Carol?
Just real quickly, we've talked about trusted community voices almost at every all wards meeting. This is a leadership group among, as far as I know, Scott, among New American folks, our neighbors. I think when we talk about outreach and we talk about expansion, we've talked about this a lot. Just translation services and outreach and meeting with trusted community voices. I'd once again like to just put that on the agenda.
Thank you for bringing that up. I know we have talked about this, and we are currently working through the work plan for the next 6 months for the Trusted Community Voices, and there's definitely some meeting dates open. And I think we've talked possibly about having you, Carol, and maybe Jess Hyman come and present to the MPAs. Would this be something that the both of you would be amenable to, and we can find a meeting date in the near future?
Sure.
Yep, and there'll probably be others too who could join, but yeah.
Present to the trusted community voices about MPAs.
Yeah, and certainly you can have discussions on who you think would be the best representatives and to do that.
I'll just simply say that as I look around here, I don't see a lot of diversity in terms of what our community is. And I think using those funds to engage with communities and individuals that are not as well represented would be a very good use of those funds. And I'd like to see us move in that direction. Certainly, speaking as an individual from Ward 3, we have a very strong interest in engaging with and bringing steering committees on from the King Maple neighborhood and folks from our New American community. So just wanted to say that. Thanks everyone for your time, for coming out. I think we had a very substantive, very robust discussion tonight. I appreciate all of you who attended online as well. We will get together and get this next meeting planned. And without that, I'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Meeting adjourned at
Chris.
7:20.
Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for facilitating.
I appreciated it.